Welcome back. Welcome back to Unfiltered Unspoken. And today we have Amanda Quick. And we are super excited because we actually get to announce that she has a book release coming on Tuesday, January the 10th, correct?
Yes, you're correct.
All right, perfect. And Amanda is the sex trafficker's wife. So Amanda is going to talk to you a little bit today about how she went through the traumas of going through the process of accepting her husband back in 2016 after being found guilty of attempted self sex trafficking. So I'm going to bring Amanda up. I'm going to let her tell you a little bit. And then, as you know, Sid and I are going to go back and forth with questions. Welcome to Unfiltered Unspoken, Amanda.
Thank you so much for having me. So, where do we begin? In 2016, I was a full-time stay-at-home mom, 3 kids, regular, normal life. And my then husband at the time just didn't come home from work one day. And eventually I found him in jail, arrested for attempted human trafficking with a $250,000 bond. To say I was shocked is a gross understatement. I had no idea what was going on. I thought there had to be some mistake. It made no sense to me. And later I learned that what he was at least admitting to me to was that he had been soliciting escorts his entire adult life, all throughout our marriage. And he swore up and down that the charge against children, because what had happened is this was a sting operation to meet an 11 and 14-year-old. He swore up and down that he would have never gone through with it. And he was just trying to help them and trying to figure out if he could report it and all of this. And me, with my own trauma, I chose to believe him for a period of time. I chose to believe the man that I married, that he was not a monster that everybody said he was. And so I supported him through the criminal trial, and the criminal trial ended with him receiving only 4 years of probation if he pled guilty to attempted solicitation of a minor. And so he took that deal. And because of the statutes in Colorado, he actually moved back into the home and had full access to our children. And fast forward, I eventually realized I couldn't stay with a man who'd been cheating on me. And there was many ghosts in the closets that were just slowly coming to the surface. And I eventually separated from him. But that's when I really started to see how bad it was. I started to see his mental health deteriorate. I started to see his attacks on me. And I started to see how inappropriate his behavior was towards our children. But I had a nasty fight ahead of me, because the fact that I stayed in the marriage at all meant that I had to fight the family court system as well to prove that my kids were in danger. And that was not an easy thing to do, despite his felony offense for sex trafficking. But this was my opportunity to stand in my power. And it took me 18 months, a very long custody fight, $75,000, and I did eventually succeed, and I did prove my case. And my story, my mission to the world is to share that story, is to share how important it is for us to step into our power, to share everything that we've been through, and that we have the power to change our lives. This is no matter how bad it gets, that we truly have the power to change our lives. So my book is coming out, and I'm so excited to share it with all of you.
Well, that was loaded. That was loaded. And I'm sure way loaded, more loaded for you than it was for me. But wow. I guess where I want to start here, at the time of which your husband kind of like disappeared, and what at that point, this is a platform about all types of trauma and abuse, and I'm pretty sure with being a stay-at-home mom and not knowing what's going on, 3 kids, like what was your mind going through at that moment? What were you feeling? What did you think had happened? Kind of walk me through your kind of emotional process at that point.
Well, at first it was, is he dead in a ditch somewhere, right? Because he didn't come home and I couldn't find him, and I called the hospitals and all of that. And then when I eventually found him in jail, arrested for attempted human trafficking with a $250,000 bond, I was in so much shock. I thought it had to be a mistake. I thought maybe somebody had stolen his wallet even. I mean, we lived in a small Colorado town. Like, it made no sense to me. I didn't even know what the charge meant. Like, I was like, shipping containers and borders? What? Like, I didn't even understand. And I was so sure that he was the person I believed he was and the man that I married that I kept searching for another explanation. I was just, and I had also a huge amount of fear that if somehow he got wrapped up into this, that somehow I was going to be blamed as well. And then I was going to lose my kids. And I held so much fear that they were going to come raid our house, that they were going to come storm it and take all these things. Like, you watch enough CSI and you have really no idea how it all works. And, once I learned that it was a sting operation, I was still trying to figure out how my husband could even be involved in something like this. Like, I was in complete disbelief that the man I married could have anything to do with harming children.
Oh, I'm sorry, Demetri, you're going.
Oh no, you can go ahead, Sid. Go ahead.
Okay. What I wonder is, in the process of, I guess, finding out the details of everything, was there a particular type of person, that was more so the target in, the trafficking, whereas it kind of made you safe? Like, what about you, made you not a target for him, or, wanted to make a family with him rather than, what he was doing?
Right. Well, he truly never fully admitted to his crime to me. He always claimed that he only was ever interested in adults, but he would sort of slyly mention that occasionally maybe he didn't actually ever know how old they were. And maybe he could tell that maybe they weren't actually as interested, they weren't as participatory. And I'm like, well, perhaps they didn't, weren't there of their own free will. And so he had this whole story in his head that he was helping them because he was paying the service. For me, I was actually the one he cheated on his second wife with, and he cheated on her. I was the escape from his second wife. And so on some level, while I wasn't being paid and I wasn't being trafficked, I was another escape for him for a period of time. And then eventually he chose to escape from our marriage and our life. And so I never got swept up into that part of the world. He put on a different front for me. He was this, this good guy with a good job and great father. And I was, if anything, his version of the world, that he was this amazing person. And he had all of this belief that he was such a good guy, and he lived a double life. And I had no idea.
Wow. So after he pled guilty to attempted, how long did you stay in the marriage, and what caused you to decide to leave?
So he pled guilty in January of 2017, and we separated. I told him I was done being with him about January of 2018, but we didn't file for divorce until about October of 2018. So in that period of time, I actually went back to work. I realized I needed to, I couldn't be reliant on him anymore. And I went back to work and I started trying to figure out if I could repair my marriage, because at the time, all I believed he was guilty of was soliciting adult prostitutes. And so I was like, okay, we're dealing with a sex addiction. We need to address that. And that's what I thought we were processing. But I still really was having a hard time getting over that. He was admitting to cheating on me with over 50 women at the time. And so that was not an easy thing to get over. And I started feeling that there was ghosts in the room. And I started coming home from work and having to have half a bottle of wine before I could even speak to him. I was really not doing very well. And eventually I started to realize that I couldn't stay married to him, but I didn't see him as a danger to my children yet. And so I started separating from him. I actually started dating for a little while, just trying to find some happiness somewhere else. And eventually I started to see the mental health stuff start to come forward. The moment I stopped supporting him and enabling him, he started to turn on me, and he started to tell the kids things like I was leaving them and starting the alienating behavior. And I was really frustrated. I had stayed and supported him, and I was doing everything I could to try to keep my family together, but I was basically being attacked from the other side. And he actually even tried to kick me out of the house and claim he was this primary parent and he did all kinds of tricks in the books to try to make it look like I was the bad guy. I was a drunk, I was, all of these things. And it didn't ever work, but it really I started to see that there was more darkness under the surface. And the more we separated and the more we fought, my kids' behavior also started to change. And it's turned from just alienation to sexually inappropriate behavior. And when I saw my own children become groomed and start to be inappropriate with me and start to say some really inappropriate things, that's when I understood. Like, oh, hello, he was arrested for trying to have sex with 11, 14-year-olds. All of the red flags came flashing in front of my face, because all of a sudden I realized my own children are actually in danger. And whether he even knows how inappropriate he is or not, it doesn't matter, because I have to get them the hell out of there.
Now, did you, I know that, when the cases kind of came about, it's kind of, when the first time you were hearing things or finding out things, on the like infidelity front, was there like, you might not have noticed stuff you might have been convicted for, but did you notice just like a distinct things that happen, when people are sleeping with other people? Did you notice like distancing from you, or did you pop up with any diseases, or that, you know what I mean? Like anything that might have given you an inkling, at least that he was being that he was cheating.
So he worked very long hours. He always had. He'd been a workaholic his whole life. And before we had kids, I worked at the same company. And so we would just go to work together and come home together. And once I had kids, I stayed home, and he would continue to work. And he worked like 12-plus-hour days. And about 2014, actually, his company was purchased, and he ended up having to travel for work, and he had direct reports in another state. And so he was gone for a full week out of every month. And so yes, he was very absent in a lot of ways. And yes, he worked a ton. And there were definitely times he didn't pick up his phone, he didn't answer, and he was not around. But we had 3 young kids, and he worked long hours, and I justified all of it. Justified all of the behavior. And I never searched his phone. I didn't even have access to his passwords. He worked in IT. And so everything was very locked down. And so, yes, were there red flags? 100%. But I didn't see them at the time, and I didn't go searching for them either.
So, was any of his victims exposed? Like, do you know of any of the victims?
I don't. And nothing was ever exposed as far as anything beyond the sting. And, the truth is the families don't actually ever get the information. It wasn't until years later that I actually even got the case file information of what they even had on him in the first place. And they didn't really, unfortunately, they didn't go digging very far. They got him for the sting, and then they left it. And actually the police officers, I later learned, were very frustrated because they wanted to really get these guys, and they couldn't actually get them as much as they wanted, and they ended up all on basically just probation, and nobody really went to jail for anything. But obviously these were people who had been involved in this for a long period of time. It's statistically impossible that this is the first time.
Was there ever, did you ever have any like communication, or did he have any ties still to like either women in his marriages before you?
I never spoke to any of them. I know once he finally did separate from wife number 2, she left town, and the other one was also gone. So I never communicated with anybody. I actually did try to reach them at one point during the divorce, just trying to get more information on him, and nobody ever returned my phone calls. I was really isolated in a lot of ways from even understanding his past.
Wow. So you also mentioned that there were a lot of folks that were taking his side, and he was charged with he pled guilty to attempted human trafficking, I guess, to avoid other charges.
Well, he pled guilty to attempted solicitation because they offered him probation, so he didn't even have to go to jail. Like they didn't. It was a no-brainer from his perspective. He had to go through a treatment program, but he never would serve time. So that's all he ever pled guilty for. And his family, his mom and his sister, still to this day are in support of him. They still believe his side of the story. They still believe that I'm the disgruntled ex-wife that is keeping his kids from him, or whatever the story is.
And they know that he pled guilty and
Oh yeah, they were with me the whole time, up when I found him in jail through the whole thing. And they were scared I was going to run then, and really tried to keep me with him and try to say how important it was. And the kids needed their dad, and push on all of my family obligation. I have my own trauma from my dad leaving when I was 9. And so it terrified me that my kids were going to be left without a dad. And I couldn't see him as dangerous. And so they pushed on all of that. And then when I did decide to leave, they were like, okay, we understand why you can't be married to him. But it was very much of how important it was that my children need their father. And to this day, I don't also have contact with them either.
It sounds like somebody was abused as a child. Do you know if he was abused as a child?
I don't have confirmation from anybody. He never at least remembered in a way that he shared with me. But I have my own suspicions. The family themselves they were very isolated. There was no extended family around. They were kind of just their own family unit. He has one sister who was completely estranged from the rest of the family, doesn't talk to anybody. You don't just up and, remove yourself from your family. I mean, she wouldn't even show up when his father passed away on his deathbed. Like, there's definitely some stuff going on in the family that I never was privy to.
That's clear. That's clear. It seems like they are very used to kind of sweeping stuff under the rug. Like, did he come from like a well-to-do, affluent family?
They were middle class. They were but they kind of just isolated themselves from everybody. He wasn't wealthy, but wasn't poor either.
Mm-hmm,
they were always had enough.
Now, I do recall you saying, once he was back at home, things kind of took a turn for the worse. Now, I assume since, his kind of being has been pretty consistent based on the fact that, before you knew anything, do you think that the change in behavior was because he wasn't able to participate in what he had been doing? Was that his release? Was that
in a lot of ways, if your drug of choice is removed, it's going to cause a reaction, right? His drug of choice was sex, and sex in a very dangerous and he always liked to push the boundaries in that sense on some level. And the moment he was out on bond, he couldn't engage in that, and on probation, he couldn't engage in that. And so he was having to deal with major mental health issues. And I'm sure that was not easy. He was put on medication for depression and anxiety, and nothing seemed to be working. And he actually expected me to play therapist and to try to help him deal with his stuff. And that was very triggering to me. I'm having to hear over and over again how he would choose to, numb out basically by going and having sex with somebody else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And how do I want to, did he ever, or did you ever notice that there was, kind of outlandish requests between you two in the bedroom?
Yeah, he, very early on in our marriage, or actually before we were married, in our dating life, he really wanted me to allow other people into the bedroom. He really wanted to invite other men specifically. He wanted to watch. That was a fantasy of his. And when I refused, he got very angry with me. He tried to make me feel guilty because I had some teenage promiscuity, and those meaningless encounters, you would do things with them, but why won't you do them with me? And I continued to hold my ground and say, absolutely not. This is not this kind of relationship. And I care about you. I want more than all of that. And he eventually dropped it. But, I obviously, looking back, he definitely wanted me to participate more in his engagements than I was willing. And I'm obviously grateful. I always said no. But yeah, there were definitely things he wanted to do that I wouldn't do.
So did he ever do anything in front of you? Did he ever do anything disrespectful in front of you?
No, he didn't do anything like that. I was his, good side. I was the wife with kids and the one he could show it to the world how much of a good person he was.
What other kind of trauma abuse did he do to you besides the? Did he physically abuse
Well,
you?
he never physically harmed me, never physically laid a hand on me. I was terrified of the man, though. From a mental and emotional perspective, he was the best manipulator you could ever meet. He was so sure of his side of the story that I often questioned my own sanity. I often questioned whether I was the crazy one. And he would tell me that I'm the narcissist, and I would go, maybe I am. Am I the crazy one here? Am I causing all of this? He had a way of talking to you almost like he knew something you didn't, and he would just try to get under your skin in that way. And he would chase me around the house. If we were having a conversation and he didn't want it to be over, he would literally chase me around the house so that I would continue the conversation with him. I had to lock myself in rooms sometimes just to get away from him. And so, no, never laid a hand on me, but I was 100% afraid of him. When we did start separating and physically lived other places, he would walk up and down the street just watching me, just like it felt like stalker behavior. And it just amplified my fear even more.
Well, it don't seem like it felt like stalking. That was like if you have somebody on the books literally doing the wildest that he's been into, I wouldn't have taken that lightly either whatsoever. So yeah, it probably wasn't just a feeling. That was probably fact.
Yeah, I felt watched. I felt like every move I would make, he would somehow try to use it against me in some way. He would continually tell the children things to try to get under my skin. He began using them to get to me, and constantly pushing the boundaries, constantly trying to pretend he was the nice guy just so he could push the boundaries and get one more word in or say one more thing. And as we were separating, he would continually try to hug me and touch me and send me love notes and to try to all the love bombing. And when then it didn't work, he would get even more angry.
Yeah, because it's control.
Right. And so the moment I stopped supporting him, it just got worse and worse and worse because I became the enemy, and he was he was completely fixated on me. He was completely fixated on gaining back this relationship, even after he'd blown it all up.
Yeah.
Gaslighting and narcissistic behaviors is definitely something to deal with, and that's what people don't understand. I've been there. So
it makes you feel crazy, right? And even though there's no physical harm to your physical body, there was a point where I was diagnosed with PTSD because every time my phone would ring, I would have a panic attack because every conversation with him was high conflict. There was literal hostage situations going on between letting the kids come over to my house, and I needed to negotiate with him before he would let him out the car. Like it was crazy making. And the fact that I had to go through an 18-month long custody battle with a felony sex offender is insanity, but that's the system we live in today. The fact that he just had probation and he got his parenting rights back meant that I had to prove my kids were actually in danger, not just the potential for danger.
Yeah, and I was going to ask that, why did the law make it so hard for you knowing his crime?
It was irrelevant because my children were not his victims. And the fact that at least in the state of Colorado, and this is true in some other states as well, a sex offense does not automatically remove your constitutional right to parent. And so the constitutional right to parent is so strong that meant that unless the children could be proven in direct harm, that he had full rights to them as any other person.
So what about when he started harming them?
I had to prove it. Grooming behavior is not an easy thing to prove. It is not. It is subtle. It is boundary pushing. It's climbing into their beds at night. It's showing them inappropriate things, but acting like it's no big deal. My 7-year-old son at the time says, "Sometimes I suck on daddy's fingers." And he just blew it off like it was some game. Child Protective Services interviewed my son and did nothing. Like all of that gets very hard to prove because it's always just a little bit not okay. And grooming is one of the things that is how these things begin to happen. It's not actually and so it's a question of how bad does it have to get? And the court system is not protective. The court system is only punitive if you can prove that something actually happened. And so I had to sit with this, like, I don't want my kids to be abused in order for them to take it seriously. And how can I even prove it when it actually happens? And that's the reality of the family court system today.
So how were you able to prove it to the court system?
So this is where I got to the point where I felt like I couldn't do anything. I had hired evaluators, I'd hired lawyers, I hired everybody because I was trying to figure out how to put this all together. And I was actually guided to see a psychic of all people. And I didn't believe in any of it at the time, but I was at my wit's end. Like, help me, somebody, help me, universe. And this psychic actually told me that she read a past life of ours together and shared where all of the fear was actually coming from, and said, you need to get a handle on it and you need to make a choice. You need to really make a choice that you're done with this for good. And I thought I had, but there was some part of me that was still holding on to a thread that he would get better and my kids could have a father in their lives. And I had to release that so that I could see what else I could do. And when I left that meeting, I sparked a new fire in myself. And what I did that really changed everything is I started asking for help from everybody I could think of. It wasn't just the court people I hired. It was literally everybody who popped in my mind I called. And what happened after that was really nothing short of miraculous. I had an ICE connection that put me in touch with Homeland Security. They got me in touch with the man who put the cuffs on him in 2016, got me in touch with the police officer that put the cuffs on him in 2016. They reopened the case file. They vowed to help me in any way they could. The DA actually unsealed the actual case file that I had never seen. And I was able to see the text transcript between him and the undercover agent. And I didn't have any of that information. And so I was able to actually get what actually happened, and any doubt left in my mind was gone once I read that. And, I was able to start recording my kids and able to start to show the grooming behaviors from their standpoint. And I actually got a bunch of information directly from them. And I just collected data after data after data. And I had a 3-inch ring full binder of all of the information when I went to court. And, in the end, the judge saw what was happening, and she did actually give him one last opportunity to get his shit together. And she basically said, unless he gets more evaluations and more therapy and more things involved and filed a compliance with the court, that he might get some time if he could do that. But if he didn't do any of those things, he was going to only have supervised visitation, and he did none. And so basically what happened is he then chose not to exercise his supervised visitation, and we have now not heard from him since April of 2020.
So was there any fight for custody at all? Like, was he going for the kids at all?
Oh yeah. That was an 18-month long. So once he filed for divorce, he tried to kick me out of the house and tried to go after custody.
And I ask this because I know, especially with fathers that, work a lot, even the ones that do have the best intentions, these are the fathers that, you ask them, they child, the doctor will teach his name. They don't know. Like, what type of father was he? Like, was it even, him trying to get custody because he was a good father, or because it was, just spite in opposition to what's going on?
So before his offense, he was the absent father. He didn't know the teachers' names, didn't know the kids' sizes, anything of the sorts, right? I was the full-time stay-at-home mom. He was gone all the time. After he was arrested and he wasn't working anymore, he was more engaged with them, and he really wanted to show the world. That was like the last thing he had left, as I'm a good father. And he really held on to that, and he really tried to participate. I mean, the kids actually adored him. He would play video games and play Disneyland, Dad, all day long. And while that's great and all, he was also massively inappropriate and had no idea the effect that his disorders were having on the children. And, whether he even intentionally or not was grooming them, it doesn't matter. He was being incredibly inappropriate and teaching them incredibly inappropriate behavior. And so, he tried to play this role like he was this amazing dad, and he deserved the 50-50. But the truth is the statutes in all of the states are really leaning towards 50-50. And so it's very hard to have anything else unless you can prove actual danger.
Did they not take into consideration what he just pleaded guilty to? No,
it was irrelevant. It literally was irrelevant. It was irrelevant because they were not his victims. And that is the reality of the court system.
Now, I'm sure though, and even like with the defense that trial, they would have had to try to pull something in his past. You know what I mean? That's what they do. They character develop. You know what I'm saying, to bang the point across. So how does it not work in that? Like that's
It doesn't. No.
insane.
I had to dig it up. Like, as the other party, I literally had to dig up all of the information because his criminal court case was closed. His criminal court case and a family court case, it's different courts, it's different, like it's not connected as much as you think it is. And so I had to dig it all up. I had to bring it to the surface. And even then, with the fact that Colorado has a constitutional right to parent, that outweighs anything unless I can prove the kids are in direct danger. And I watch you shaking your head, and I completely agree with you.
So, like, I'm irritated. Like, I'm extremely irritated because no.
And that was my reality. I was sitting there going, I'm fighting with a fucking narcissist who is grooming my kids, who pled guilty for trying to have sex with children, and I still have to have a $75,000 fight, and I am losing my freaking mind doing so. Like, that was my reality.
Wow. I just, the system, we hear in so many ways how they fail us, and just so many ways. And it's like, until someone gets hurt, that's when they want to do something about it. Do your kids ask about him now?
They did it first. They lost a parent in a lot of ways, and that was hard. That was another trauma to go through. But I was very intentional about what I shared with them from as age appropriate as I could, but I wasn't going to hide it from them. They needed to know what really happened. And so obviously, as they've gotten older, they can understand more, but I told them the truth from the beginning. And I told them that he made the choices he made, knowing the consequences, and knowing that he wasn't going to have access to them, and he still made those choices, and allowed them to process those feelings. And every time it comes up, we talk about it again. But now today, they don't even remember him. It's been almost 3 years, and 2 weeks after my divorce was final, the pandemic hit, and the world changed and everything changed. And so they don't really remember much before all of that at this point. And on some level, that's a good thing. We get to heal and move on. And the pandemic actually was a blessing for us. We got to come home and heal as a family together after all of that chaos.
What I want to ask, just on a realism tip, because we might have people watching this that not exactly going through the same thing, but maybe they're trying to fight for custody or from a bad situation, or make their way out of a bad situation. So with you being a stay-at-home mother, how were you able to fund everything you needed as far as litigation, PIs, all of that, because we can give people motivation all day. We can let them know that there's an end to all of this, but if they really don't feel like they have the means or know even how to game plan,
well,
what to do.
The first thing I did is I got a job. I got a job before I left, and a lot of that was for financial reasons, but there was also a sense of identity that I needed. I needed to no longer just be mom and wife. I needed to know that I was more than that. And as making connections and being more and realizing that I'm worth more was really the first step. Now, from a financing standpoint, we had access to more money than most people do. And it hit me really, really hard after my divorce was finalized that it cost me $75,000 to have this fight. And it was a really, really hard fight. And if I didn't have access to that kind of money, I wouldn't have been able to even start to have that kind of fight. And, I recognize I was very privileged in a lot of ways, and I had access to education, and I had access to resources. And it's actually one of my missions that I would like to start in the very near future, if I can get enough funding, is to start a nonprofit so that there is a way that people can have access to cash grants and the mental and emotional resources they need, because the $75,000 wasn't what changed it, but I needed that to even start to have the fight in the first place.
Yes, that's for one awesome that you recognize that, because not to say that it's going to be completely impossible for anybody that is watching and might need to, that's what they need to do, but money makes the world go around. We live in a capitalist society. They're going to tie everything to money.
The fact that money determines who wins and who loses in so many of these cases just makes my blood boil, truthfully. like that is showing how broken the system is. And, the system is meant to support us if we can not give it our power and we can, have the resources to use it in the right way. It can work, and it did work in the end for me. But the reality is, if you don't even have the ability to start to have that fight, and if you, have lived your whole life where the system is supposed to save you and protect you, it's going to be a whole lot harder.
Yeah. Wow. And I have a question. Do you think that if you would have stayed any longer, that he would have tried to sex traffic your kids?
I honestly have no idea. I can't hardly go down that road myself. From my mental perspective, he was very watched on probation, and I don't know that it would have happened immediately, but would things have started to go down a pretty dark road? Absolutely.
Okay. I know it's a tough question, to answer, so just transparency.
How has what have you, I guess, what are the traumas that you have taken, from this situation? Sometimes in retrospect, you like, dang, I didn't do that before. I never used to feel this way about this before. Or what have you noticed, that has changed about you since all of this has happened?
Well, for me, I was always a fiercely independent, I know everything about everything sort of person. And, realizing how wrong I could be about something, and that how I had allowed myself to blindly decide that I was right, years ago about somebody and not look at things, was a really hard reality for me to face. And, I was very hard on myself. How did I not know? How did I miss it? How did I not see the truth? How did I stay for all that time? Like, I was really, really hard on myself for a long time about that. And, on some level, I felt like I deserved to be alone. I felt like I deserved to go through that. Like, I created that for myself for some reason. And I really put a ton of that on myself. And, I focused on, okay, we're through it, and, I can be here for my kids, but I stayed really isolated for a really long time. Sharing my story and talking about it with other people, that's terrifying. And, you hold so much shame and so much guilt that you didn't even actually do because you didn't see it, or you didn't leave, or you didn't whatever. And we carry a huge weight for that. And, that's part of the reason I wrote this book, is to face that fear and to release that shame, and to really go forward and invite other people to share their own stories and release the shame they're holding from it.
Yeah, I know that's tough. Sid just have technical difficulty. She'll be back up shortly. Are you current? So I have a question, and just for the audience to see transparency, because I always say that when we go through things, we do need professional help sometimes to help us through it. Are you currently getting professional help right now?
Not right now. I did for a while after my divorce. I've graduated from every single therapist that I've been to. They usually say I don't need them anymore, and it's fascinating. But they usually say I don't need them anymore. You're good. The pandemic made it really hard to actually continue therapy for a lot of people. I'm not currently. We're in therapy. After my divorce, I jumped into every other healing modality I could find, and I work actually as an energy healer, and work with a different kind of realm of therapy, in a sense, working with the physical body and the mental body and the emotional body and the spiritual bodies, to help people really, clear out these traumas from more levels and layers of self. And so I have a lot of tools that I didn't have back then. And it doesn't mean that things don't come up. Absolutely not. Things definitely come up. And I do have people, and I do have a support system. It's just not in the traditional therapy box anymore.
Okay, can you give the audience some tips on healing through this? Because I could only imagine the traumas that you went through and that the kids went through as well. So, if you can give tips like how you help with the kids and how you help with yourself to go through
So
this.
the biggest thing I find is that we hold so much judgment over our experience, and so much judgment of ourselves, and so much, how did I not know, or how did I not see, or even judgment of the feelings that we're currently having, right? We judge ourselves for even being upset about things. And so if we can get into the place where we can start to observe ourselves a little bit and start to look at, why do I feel this way? And what is my body showing me? And what is the bigger picture to all of this? And have compassion for ourselves. Because it's not that the feelings are bad. It's that we need to acknowledge them and release them and honor the stories that we have gone through. And, when my kids go through something and their physical body will even have a response. And so we talk about it. We say, what are we storing here? And what needs to be addressed here? And what feeling actually needs to be felt so that we can release it? Because none of those things are bad things. None of the emotions are wrong. It's really about how do we see them for what they are, and how do we recognize that there's a message in them so that we can actually begin to make new choices and no longer hold on to that.
Wow. I mean, that is really good advice to give others, because we always go through the trauma piece of it, but the healing piece is
Mhm.
important as well. What measures and what next steps do we take?
100%. And it's obviously layered and complicated. And if you do need help finding somebody who can really hold space for you to go through that process, because feeling seen and feeling heard and feeling understood is such a big piece of it. And there's not actually very many people that can hold space for really big traumas. If you're triggering your therapist, they're not the right person. You need to find somebody that can really hold space and really see you and hold you as your body is processing this.
Mhm.
And that to me is the biggest piece, is finding somebody who can help you through and just guide you a little bit, because your body knows, your system knows, like it's trying to show you, but feeling safe enough to actually process those feelings and start to release them is really the biggest piece.
I agree 100%. Can you share your energy healing site, so if folks are
Yeah,
looking for the
it's
service?
amandaquickhealing.com.
Okay. If anyone heard amandaquickhealing.com,
Healing.com.
so
Yeah.
if you need some healing techniques or strategies, please reach out to Amanda. So amandaquickhealing.com.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I have, gone far beyond the just initial trauma healing stuff. And, I've opened up so much more connections and so much more understandings of why we go through these big experiences and what the point of it all is. And, for me, it's been really to gain this level of compassion and understanding for why people stay in these hard situations. And then how do we actually get out, and how much power we have. Because once I succeeded at what felt like the impossible, I really recognized how much power I had. Like, if I could do that, I can do anything.
yeah. Your life, or take everything back. It's
Exactly.
a journey. Yeah. So I want to get a little bit into this book that we have releasing on
Yes.
Tuesday, the Sex Trafficker's Wife. Can you tell us
Yes.
a little bit about the book?
Yeah. So the book it's my memoir. So it goes through the entire story. It starts from that day in April of 2016 and goes all the way through everything that happened up into the end of my divorce, and all of the gory details, all of the things that I learned, all of the feelings, and I really take you through my thought process. It's really what I went through from my perspective, and how much I believed my husband in the beginning, to really what it took to see the truth and what that meant for me, and everything. And so my goal in writing it is to take people on the journey with me. And if they can gain something from their own story, if they can feel a little bit more seen in something they've been through, then I've succeeded. Because unless you've been there, you don't really know. And there's a ton of judgment out there for people who stay in abusive situations. And I have received a ton of backlash the moment I started to share my story. And that's fine. You're not going to judge me harder than I judge myself already. That's not who I'm sharing this for. I'm sharing this story for the people who have felt so alone and so isolated, the people who are sharing custody with their abusers and their children's abusers, the people who don't have the financial resources to have this fight, the people who have ever been gaslit or emotionally or mentally or physically abused in relationships, all of them. That's why I'm sharing my story, so that you can feel a little bit less alone in your own.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And that is a part of what Unfiltered, Unspoken, and the Good Fight is about, is sharing life experiences to help others going through similar situations. So I admire what you're doing. I watch you on TikTok, and you gave me some tips to do, which I've already started doing. I appreciate it. So for anyone, definitely. Amanda is heavy on TikTok. She shares a lot of inspirational her life experience on TikTok. So please, definitely, if you have TikTok, check her out. Check her out. Um, Currently, how are you? How is your state of mind right now? I know it's a long healing journey piece of it, but
It is.
let the audience.
I'm really good. I have been really good for a while. You know, people are usually surprised when they hear my story and they know me because they're like, how are you so okay? But I've done a ton of work and I'm a very strong person and I was not going to let this break me. If anything, it was fuel so that I can make something valuable out of it. If I can help other people after what I've been through, then I've done my job. And I'm from a mental perspective, I'm really well. I have a different kind of work that I get to do. I have a way to share my story and my experiences. And, my relationship with my kids is so much better. I have a new romantic relationship. I have new friends, like everything is so much better in my life.
That is awesome. That is wonderful to hear. And your smile, you're glowing. So I always see that smile on your face, which definitely shows that some people cover up with a smile, but you can tell the difference in certain smiles. And I definitely can see that glow on your face. Can you give? I want to ask a question. Can you give the audience a tip? Like, what are lessons learned through what you went through with your ex-husband, and what did this whole situation teach you?
So the biggest thing is trusting myself. And honestly, I think this is one of the grounding things that so much of humanity is struggling with is we are so inundated with so much data that goes against our own intuitions. And from a very early age, we are manipulated and gaslit by every single system out there. And we learn not to trust ourselves. We learn that that's wrong. And so this taught me that all of those little things that I, shoved away were actually my intuition. They were actually my body telling me there was something not right. And the more I listened to them, the more things started to shift and change in a good way. And so, if I could sprinkle pixie dust all over the planet and give people one thing, it would be that they freaking trust themselves and they operated from that place first. And that was probably the very biggest thing that I learned. And, on top of that, it's recognizing how worthy I was of, being safe, being secure, having a safe household, and that I didn't need to just put up with stuff because my kids needed their father. No, I needed to be okay first. As moms, we like to put our kids first. Everything, we're last. And I believed for a long time if my kids were okay, then I would be okay. But I was backwards. I need to be okay first. And my kids will be okay because I'm okay. And that was one of the very biggest things I also learned.
And I'm sorry, guys. I was having some technical issues, but I am back. Different laptop. Okay. Now, and I'm sorry, and I don't know, where you guys kind of left off with everything, but my question is, what has your, I know that the kids have not seen their father. Have they been in touch with that side of the family at all?
Nope, we have not heard from any of his family, and it'll coming up on 3 years in April.
And just out of
They lost grandparents, aunties, uncles, everybody, and they have chosen not to contact me, and I haven't reached out to them either.
I agreed. And that's just in regards to them, still kind of not believing that he's done these things, or is it
As far as I know,
embarrassment?
I'm just the bad guy keeping the kids away from everybody.
And what's sad is that what people don't realize, and I always say this, is that being victims, when people side with the abuser, especially when they know that the abuser is wrong, they cause more abuse to the victim.
They do. They do. And it's hard on some level that they lost that whole part of their family, but on another, it's actually easier. It means I don't have to deal with him in any way, shape, or form. It means they've all chosen to step out of their lives. We moved away from Colorado in 2021. I was able to totally start over. And, I didn't have people where we were in the same way. And I lost my job. And I was like, what am I doing here? There's no reason for me to be here anymore. And so, we petitioned the court, and he didn't even respond to the petition. And so we were able to move away and start over in with a whole new life. And that's been really, really good for everybody. There's no more looking over your shoulder. There's no more worried you're going to run into somebody at the grocery store or anything like that. And it's really helped to start over.
I have a quick question as well. When you reopened the case and the files to get him in trouble, was it a whole lot of victims that were in that case?
No, that case was just a sting operation. So it was manipulated by they made pretend victims. And so the sting operation where they pretend to offer children but the children aren't real. And so they're creating a scenario that they're going to catch them in the act, basically. And so the hypothetical victims were an 11 and 14-year-old, but they weren't real children.
Okay.
Thankfully.
Do you think there were real children though?
Well, it's truly statistically impossible that this would be the first time. Like the fact that he responded and continued to engage with the officer and continued to agree, and he agreed to the exchange and he agreed to the price and he showed up with money and condoms and everything they asked for. Like it's obviously he knew what was happening. And the only reason he actually left the scene of the crime is because they did things out of order than what he was used to. He was used to paying after the transaction and they wanted money up front.
I have a question. Now, I'm trying to figure out what considers this to be like sex trafficking.
So they charged him with trafficking, but then they reduced it to solicitation because of the way they had run the sting. Unless he was actually to take possession of children, it couldn't be considered trafficking. So they reduced the charge later.
And what exactly, and I'm sorry, because I never really got into these like the technicalities at all, but
if you buy and sell people,
okay,
it's trafficking.
Got it.
So it doesn't matter if you're not the one. It doesn't matter if you're not the ones moving them around. If you are purchasing people, you are a party to trafficking.
So purchasing, is there any like a blurred line between purchasing people or purchasing what that person can do for you? Like, is there any like, you know what I mean? Like, is trying to pay to have sex with the child purchasing them, or
yes,
like
it is.
Okay.
It is, because you're taking possession of a minor.
Okay.
And you're taking possession of a minor against, right? They don't have the ability to consent either.
Got it. I was thinking it would possibly, be more so of like.
Well, and people do, and I didn't know what any of it meant either. Like I said, when I first heard the crime, I thought we were like shipping containers and moving people around the world, and it didn't make sense. But from a trafficking perspective, it's much more nuanced than that. If you take possession of somebody against their will, and you are purchasing them for your own purposes, you are party to trafficking.
Got it. And that's good to know these definitions for sure.
Right. And then what's the difference between that and solicitation? Like there's all of these little lines, and at first they were charging him with trafficking, and then they did a legal review, and they're like, well, we can't quite do that, so we're going to charge with solicitation instead. And so they kept moving the line, but he was a party to trafficking on some level because he was engaging in purchasing people for his own gains.
And he's a registered sex offender too.
Correct.
So,
correct.
Now from it.
So even with that being said, I know that there's, they more so care about, or they still have their right to parent, right? But aren't you supposed to have some distance between you and children? Do your children count when that happens?
Other children. Your children are the exception. And at least in the state of Colorado, yes. So when they're on probation as a sex offender, they can't be around other children, they can't go to schools or anything like that. But the exemption is directly to your own children.
Children is children.
That's what I'm saying. Like, you know, what if they want to have kids or their friends come over after school?
Can't.
Or exactly. And how do you explain it? Like, that is,
It's not fun.
it's not. And you got to be on it. You know what I
I'm
mean?
the
Like,
one, and I was the one who had to have those conversations and have those disclosures and be the one to take to every single event and school thing and all of it. Yes.
Oh my God.
So the those that lived around you, your neighbors, did they know that he was a sex
They did.
offender?
They did. Nothing ever
like
happened in the neighborhood. I was terrified that something was going to happen. But there were things that happened. We tried to move at one point in time and people called probation on him and, didn't want him in their neighborhood and things like that. Like people there, at least in Colorado, some places are different, but where we were, there was no rules about where they can and cannot live. It's like there are some counties that you can't live within certain radius of certain things if you're a sex offender. It's not true where we were. So there was nothing anybody could do.
That's insane. That like
I can only imagine the trauma that you were going through the process of trying to have a husband with to be a father to the kids because your dad was taken out of your life, but going through mental traumas and the abuse throughout it, and then dealing with the traumas of him grooming the kids. I just can only imagine. Like, you're a strong woman.
Thank you. And it really is crazy making. And that's why I wrote a book, because it was so loud that people needed to hear this story. And, we searched and searched, and nobody's ever told the wife story. There's victim stories out there. There's even perpetrators stories out there, but nobody has ever told the wife story before. And I needed to.
That you did, and I'm glad you did, because that is, I know you said it's like a story from the NCIS or something like that, but it's like you just minding your business, living regular life, and like that's insane. So, for one, you should benefit and profit from your story, for one, because that's that was your story too and part of your experience. So I'm glad that you're able to tell it the way that you want to tell it, and while you're alive, free, healthy, with your kids and all of that, you're not telling it from a jail cell after that took his head off, because I personally don't know if I would have had the strength not to, especially when he came back. Like that's real strength, because
it was the very hardest time in my life. The urge to put my kids in the car and drive away and never to return was very, very high.
And what's crazy is the law is protected. Like, you can't even get up and leave. You have to wait for the law to say, okay, now you have permission to leave and take your kids to a
correct. I would be charged with kidnapping had I done that.
You literally had to petition the court to move.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
Do y'all not see like what's on like paper? This is not somebody made up. Like,
I know. And so despite all of that, right? Despite all of that, it was the fight of my fucking life. And I, by some grace of whatever it is you believe in, I succeeded. And I truly believe that it was the catalyst that I needed to really take back my power and to change my life and show other people how much they can change their own.
Yes, you did, and I'm thankful. I'm thankful you were able to make it out of that. Grateful your kids are. I'm kind of glad they were kind of at an age where they could possibly just put that behind them. Not happy they have been forced to live with only their mother, grow up with only their mother, but the flip side is way worse. So
correct.
They're safe,
they're loved, they're secure, and at some point in their life, they will know how much I fought to protect them.
Exactly. That's all that matters.
They know. They know. They know.
Yeah. I don't think they know yet how much in danger they were, but they will at some point.
Yes.
I told them they got to be 16 before they can read my book.
I was about to say, like, hopefully they're
not quite there, and it would be a lot for them right now. Yeah. They're 7, 10, and 12, so it's not quite there.
Yeah, those two young.
Not yet. But you'd be surprised, when my daughter was 5, she literally came in the bathroom and was like, "Mommy, did this happen to you?" Because she heard it. So, yeah.
They know more than they let on, and I'm aware of that. but before they read the gory details,
Yeah,
they need to at least be
absolutely.
able to have a conversation about it and have enough
Yeah,
understanding.
absolutely. Well, now, Miss Amanda, we want to take the time. I know that we've already, in the middle, beginning, all in the course of this conversation, have been, throwing up your book, letting people know where they can buy it, what day it comes out. Now would be the time. If there's anything else that you're working on, if there's anywhere else they can buy the book outside of the website, just anything that you want our viewers to know that you're working on, what's coming up, how they can contact you, if you do have any points of resource for women in similar situations. That was your time. You can throw all that out now,
Okay.
and let the people know.
Okay, so yes, my book comes out. We're actually in pre-release right now. So if you go to the sextraffickerswife.com, I'm linking. It's all on Amazon right now, both paperback and ebook. My goal is to actually start a nonprofit, and I'm in the process of it, but it's not started yet. And so if anybody wants to reach out to me and participate in that, my goal is to create a place where people who are fighting for custody from their abusers and their children's abusers can find resources, can find funding, can find mental and emotional support, and can find community from others who are not going to judge them for what they've gone through. And on top of that, I also run a healing and coaching business. You can find me at amandaquickhealing.com if you want one-on-one support as well.
Amanda, when we finish, if you want to post that in the Good
Sure.
Fight chat group, please share your resources. You never know who may see that and can connect to
Okay.
it. So definitely, please share. So we want to thank Amanda Quick for tuning in to Unfiltered Unspoken. Please, if you haven't, the Sex Trafficker's Wife releases Tuesday, January 10th. Get your copy, come out and support. You're going to hear the side of the wife, the victim. We don't hear much of that at all. So please tune in. And also, TikTok, the sex trafficker's wife, you have to check out Amanda's TikTok because she is on fire on TikTok and we love it, Amanda. So if you haven't learned anything today, again, we have an issue with the system failing us. As you heard, Amanda, it took her a while, 18 months to get her kids out of a household where they were groomed from her ex-husband, who pled guilty to say it again. I'm sorry, I don't want to get it wrong, Amanda.
Yeah, he pled guilty to attempted solicitation of a minor.
Yeah, so attempted solicitation to a minor. You can hear all the traumas that Amanda went through. So we take on a lot of issues, and we make folks traumas our traumas, and it can take us down. You have two folks on here as a testimony, Amanda and I, on taking on someone else's mental issues, making them our mental issues can
Yeah.
confuse you and bring additional mental traumas to yourself. So, know the red flags, get out of the situation, try different measures, professional therapy. If you're going through anything, we're just here to help through life experiences. We're not therapists and we're not psychologists. So, thank you for tuning in to Unfiltered Unspoken. Amanda, thank you so much for sharing your life experience, and tune back in. We'll be back on Sunday.